Fantrax Fantasy Football Mailbag episode heading into Week 10. Give us a league winner everyone is overlooking right now. I'm going to go with Marquise Hollywood Brown. Kyler Murray, who is Marquise Brown's former Oklahoma college quarterback, is looking like he's back. In 2022, upon Hollywood Brown's arrival in Arizona, across the first 6 weeks of football before Brown was banged up, he was the wide receiver 5 overall during that span, averaging 18.3 fantasy points per game. During that 6-week span, he was the 4th most targeted player. He was 5th in receptions and had the 7th most receiving yards, comparing him to other wide receivers. With Joshua Dobbs this season, Hollywood has had 16-plus fantasy points in 4 games. He's had 4 weeks in that system with double-digit targets. So it's a great connection with his former college quarterback that we saw last season. He's been fairly good this year. I like Hollywood Brown rest of season. Is a guy that probably doesn't cost you a ton right now if you want to go and trade for him. 2 really good questions here from Tyler. I'm going to go with the bottom one, though. Players who have underperformed thus far, but you think come around here in the back half. First one that comes to mind is Aaron Jones. He opened up the season with 26.7 fantasy points. Then he missed 2 weeks. He scored 2.4 in week 4. He missed week 5. Then they had the bye week. He was under 9 fantasy points in week 7 and 8. Back to relevancy, though, in week 9 with 17.9 fantasy points. Season high 57% of the snaps in week 9, 20 rushing attempts and 4 receptions. That's quality volume. Back-to-back weeks now of 4 catches. He is a classic dual threat running back. 3 straight games with 5 or 6 targets. I like Aaron Jones healthy to be a quality fantasy football running back rest of season. Another one is Deshaun Watson, 21-ish points in 2 of his first 3 weeks. Then he missed 4, 5, 6, and 8. Negative points in week 7 getting banged up. He returned last week to 19 fantasy points. So 3 top 10 performances this season, but he missed time and we know people don't like him in general. So when a guy is out of the mix, banged up, whatever the case is, a lot of negative perspectives are made for his fantasy football qualities. He threw and he rushed for a touchdown in week 1, 289 passing yards and a touchdown in week 3, 219 and 2 touchdowns last week. Watson has been a top 5 quarterback in points per game in all 3 of his full seasons in his career. And when a guy misses time and is out of lineups, that creates an emotional reaction for fantasy football, but I do like Deshaun Watson rest of season. T. Higgins, wide receiver 52 overall right now. Week 4, he got banged up, playing 51% of the snaps, 3.9 points. Week 5, he missed. In week 6, he came back, but not at 100%. He played 54% of the snaps. Then the bye week hit. Week 8, his snap percentage rose to 67%, so he was getting healthier. And then last week, he caught 8 of his 9 targets for 110 receiving yards, scored 19 fantasy points. Week 2, he had that huge week. He caught 8 of his 12 targets for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns, 28.9 fantasy points. I don't have much of an excuse for his week 1 goose egg or week 3's 4.1 fantasy points. But 2022, 2021, over 1,000 receiving yards, 3 straight seasons of 100-plus targets. I just think he's shown us plenty of upside. T. Higgins historically, the connection with Joe Burrow is obviously there. We've seen 2 quality games this season. I think a lot of his outlook is due to him being banged up. And again, when someone scores low fantasy points, a lot of people start thinking, this guy's not good, this guy's not useful. Last one, and I feel like it's a little bit of a take lock here, but I still have some hope for Jerry Jeudy. It's been an awful season so far. My hot takes don't look good. He's dealt with some injuries to an extent this year. I just feel like we witnessed too much in 2022, those final 7 full games with Russell Wilson. I still believe in the talent. I think Courtland Sutton has done a good job scoring touchdowns, but I think someone needs to emerge as the clear number 1 target. There were trade rumors. Those are gone for both Jeudy and Sutton. I think if he can start to earn 8 to 10 targets weekly, we can see something here. Your thoughts on Tony Pollard and what to make of his lackluster season after being a consensus top 8 running back in the offseason. So I'm going to first come out and say that I was very anti-Tony Pollard at his cost coming into the season. I had another respected analyst at one point say I've never seen somebody rank Pollard so low for one of my preliminary rankings. And I think I caved after a while and I bumped him up. but I was never in at that price tag. Running back 5, running back 11, running back 13, running back 26, running back 29, running back 11, running back 41, and running back 27 this season. So in half of those games, he's outside of the top 24 running backs in weekly fantasy scoring. He's currently 15th in rushing yards. He is, though, top 6 in targets and receptions. Believe it or not, he's second in red zone touches. Player Profiler, though, ranks him number 41 in true yards per carry, number 34 in yards per touch, number 25 in yards per reception, number 35 in evaded tackles. So not super efficient there. I do think the lack of having an Ezekiel Elliott on the team has hurt him. The one encouraging note is that he plays the number 6 and then the number 2 defenses in points per game allowed to running backs across the next 2 weeks, so there's some optimism there. 2 rebuild teams, 12-team dynasty PPR Superflex, both teams blow, both bad quarterback situations. Ayuk, Christian Watson, and Quentin Johnston. 4, Sam Howell, Sky Moore, and Elijah Moore. So I want to highlight Sam Howell, 5 top 12 fantasy finishes this season. He was the quarterback 1 in week 8, where he threw 487 and 4 touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns in week 6, 388 passing yards in week 5, 40 rushing yards in week 4. So we've seen a good mixture of things out of Sam Howell. And I like his future outlook now. I think he's earning that job. But no interest in Sky Moore. Never have had interest in Sky Moore. Elijah Moore I've loved. He has not been good. I think we are underselling Brandon Ayuk here a little bit. I think these are 3 wide receivers that have potential. I think Ayuk is clearly above Christian Watson and Quentin Johnston. But I feel like in this trade, I would have wanted to get a little bit more with Sam Howell because of Ayuk's value and the potential of these other 2 guys. But at the end of the day, in Dynasty, for Superflex leagues, I truly think you need to build around your 2 quarterbacks. I don't have a back to put in my flex spot, but I do have Tank Dell a little farther than the screenshot would go, and Kelsey on bye, so Everett is a shot in the dark. Of these guys, who am I rolling with? So you mentioned Tank Dell last week on fire, 6 receptions on 11 targets for 114 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns as the wide receiver 1 last week. Weeks 2 and 3, he had back-to-back games of 20-plus fantasy points with some good volume and receiving production. I love Jordan Addison, but I think you got to ride the hot hand. So moving forward, I think Tank Dell deserves to be in lineups until something changes. Trades to make / strategy at this stage of competing in Dynasty, QB2 targets. So I'm going to make this very general, but if you are a competitor in your Dynasty league, you need to identify who is not a competitor. When you do identify who is not a competitor, I'd start looking at the build of their team. Who are some older pieces? Are there some veterans you can target for that championship run that does not really align with them maybe rebuilding or building for next year? A good example is that there's a team in one of my home Dynasty leagues who is at the very bottom of the table right now, but he has Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen is 33 years old, so does the worst team in the league, in a Dynasty league, really need Adam Thielen right now? Probably not. So again, identify who is not a competitor. Maybe you have some younger pieces, maybe you have some, excess capital for the draft this coming year, and figure out how do you align what their team needs for the future, maybe with some win-now pieces. Thoughts on James Cook rest of season outlook on what Lenny Thies Fournette signing means to James' lackluster usage thus far. So James Cook outside the top 30 the last 2 weeks in a row for fantasy football running backs, marks the 4th time across the last 5 weeks he's finished as the running back 31 or worse. He's coming off of 10 touches, that's poor volume. Hasn't surpassed 16 touches since week 3. Regardless of your opinion on Leonard Fournette, he has historically caught passes, scored touchdowns, produced fantasy points, touched the ball a lot. So we have a running back in James Cook who has not been great for fantasy football, not getting the volume, and has Leonard Fournette in the system. I simply think he's a sell. Follow the Fantrax page for consistent fantasy football content.